What's up, guys? It's Toad back with you again. Thanks to all of you who hung out for the NFL video, which I did last night. I know I usually do it on Saturday nights, but I did it last night because there was no real, Saturday college football slate anymore, although we have college football playoffs coming in today. We do have two NFL games today, so I talked about every single NFL game on the show yesterday, so go check that out. I gave out two NFL plays that are both tomorrow on Sunday. Trying to get some wins here to end the year, man. It looks like it's going to be a losing year for me unless I really make a nice run here. We'll see. I have 6 plays today, 3 college basketball, 1 NHL, 1 NBA, and 1 college football playoff play. So let's get into it, man. No time to waste. We got a lot going on here. Let me know if my mic is still working, by the way, because I haven't actually checked it this time. College basketball, man. I mean, I'm going to talk about some of these games real quick. The Big East and ACC look like they've kind of started playing conference play, although we don't have conference play in full swing yet. We do have Marquette and Xavier. Number 9, Marquette at Xavier. Marquette is the favorite in this game. So Marquette, I mean, they are one of the better teams. Like the odds are kind of telling you what you need to know here that, yeah, Marquette is still actually the better team. They're actually up, I think, from 3.5 to 5.5. I don't have a good read on this game, but let me see Marquette here. Marquette's actually up, from 2.5 to 5. So it looks like the money has come in on the Marquette side, even though we do see 52% of the tickets, 71% of the cash on Xavier. I mean, I don't really have a situational angle on this one way or the other. Marquette coming off beating Butler to kind of open Big East play, I'm pretty sure. Now they have to go out on the road. So playing a road game in the Big East, it's not exactly like the easiest spot, but it's not like Marquette's not used to going to Xavier either. So, and Xavier, they're coming off a couple tough losses against Cincinnati and UConn. I mean, those tend to be pretty difficult. Those are difficult opponents, so they can kind of be tough, kind of physical games in a way too. So coming off of that, it's not really the easiest spot for Xavier, really. So the spot actually might look slightly better for Marquette in this game. So that would be the way that I would look in that one. Let me I'm going to quickly make sure that my mic is working here. I know I have one viewer here right now, but let me just make sure. I always should do that. We got to be professional around here, right? Let me just make sure that that is the case here. Yes. Okay, good. We got it. All right. Next up, I'll talk about these couple of Big East games. UConn, number 11, is at Butler. Another Big East game here. Figured I would just hit some of these bigger games real quick. UConn coming off a few big games in a row, man. I mean, beating Baylor, beating Texas on the road, beating Gonzaga in Washington. Huge games. Then they started Big East play with a win over Xavier. UConn on a roll right now. Now they're playing their first road Big East game here as well. Again, maybe not the easiest spot, but I mean, UConn, they're rolling right now. So it's either they're going to continue this momentum or they're going to start being fatigued. I don't know, but it's not like Butler's recent stretch has been easy at all. Houston, North Dakota State's not even that bad. Wisconsin and Marquette losing all of those games. But I mean, Butler, they're obviously the inferior team here to UConn. So Butler, if fatigue is going to set in, it may affect Butler more than it affects UConn. We do see UConn up from 7.5 to 8.5, 62% of tickets on them, 60% of the cash coming in on Butler. So I don't know if it's like numbers guys coming in thinking this number's a bit high. UConn does like to play a little bit slower, or really slow, actually. And Butler plays a bit faster. So if the pacing contrast here goes the way of the home team, which sometimes is the case, it would wind up maybe benefiting Butler a little bit. But if UConn wants to slow the game down, that also may make it more difficult for them to cover a big number on the road. So a lot of kind of conflicting thoughts that I have on this one. So I'm not going to get involved in that. And then Mississippi State, Memphis is also a pretty big game. Memphis, both of these teams are good. Mississippi State has gone from a pick 'em to a 1.5 point favorite. This game, I believe, is a neutral site game. No, it isn't. It's in Memphis. That's crazy. So the odds makers really telling you something here, even though this is a home game for Memphis and Memphis is ranked 21. We're looking at Mississippi State being the favorite. So the odds makers are telling you Mississippi State is actually the better team. I don't disagree with that. Mississippi State, they're good and they're flying under the radar right now. Memphis just kind of tends to be a little bit more flashy than Mississippi State is. 66% of tickets, 75% of the cash on the Memphis side. But I would look to play the Mississippi State side if I was going to play this game, man, just because of the market read on this. It looks way too easy to take Memphis. You're getting the ranked team. This is like the inverse of what I usually preach, where usually I'm saying if you have an unranked team at home that's favored over a ranked road opponent, it's a good moneymaker to play that home team. In this case, we actually have an unranked road favorite in this one against a ranked home underdog. That is wild, man. It makes me almost want to play Mississippi State here. And Memphis coming off a couple of nice wins over Clemson and then Virginia, both on the road. And I know Virginia's a little bit down. They do have Ole Miss up in a week, and Ole Miss is ranked, but I mean, this is still a big SEC game. So are they really going to overlook Mississippi State? I don't think they will. I think both of these teams are going to show up to play in this game. So then it just becomes a matter of which team is the better team. But my hesitation on Mississippi State is they've played the lesser schedule. Memphis has played a more difficult schedule. And Mississippi State, I mean, they have a few decent games in here, I guess. I mean, actually, well, Utah, SMU, UNLV, I mean, those teams, none of those teams are really bad. Butler, I mean, that was kind of an ugly loss, but maybe they just kind of got caught in that game not paying attention. Pitt, I mean, the fact that they blew some of these teams out, like Pitt, UNLV, I mean, that does look pretty good. They beat McNeese, who's not that bad either, but Memphis, I mean, they have a little bit more of a difficult schedule. So I'm not going to play this game, but I mean, I would still agree with the Mississippi State side in that one just because of the market read on that. It's just like the odds makers are almost begging you to take Memphis in that one, and I'm not going to do that. Rutgers, Princeton. This is a game where I consider playing Princeton. I mean, Rutgers coming off a pretty big couple of wins here, man, against Penn State and Seton Hall. Seton Hall was their like start of Big East play, I'm pretty sure, and that's a New Jersey rivalry, even though Rutgers was a huge favorite in that game and they barely won. So on the one side, you could say they know they didn't play well, so that means they're going to need to be focused. But on the other hand, I think it could be a letdown spot for them because they're going from playing kind of this one sibling rivalry where the siblings are almost even between them and Seton Hall down to being the bigger brother here against Princeton. So it could be a letdown for Rutgers, even though they did not even come close to covering as a big favorite in that game. So I don't know, but they might consider that Seton Hall game to be a bigger game just because it is a Big East team and Princeton's, an Ivy team. So they may consider that to be a little bit of a lesser opponent. This is in the Never Forget Tribute Classic. What is this? A 9/11 themed tournament? I have no idea. This is in Newark, New Jersey. So it's not, this is actually at Seton Hall's home arena. It looks like very strange. So both of these teams playing in their home state, but not in their home arena. Princeton, I mean, I would still lean to the Princeton Princeton side slightly because they were also coming off a game where they were a huge favorite and they barely got by. But in their case, it was against a 1-win, big-time little brother on Monmouth. Monmouth, maybe the littlest brother in the state of New Jersey. So I think Princeton maybe a little bit more embarrassed coming off a game like that. So my lean would be to Princeton in this game. I haven't played it, but Rutgers definitely public, but they're up from 4.5 to 6.5, and it does look like more of the cash is coming in on Rutgers. 88% of tickets, 97% of the cash. So I don't know. Princeton, I don't think Princeton is a bad team, though, even though maybe they're slightly down this year. I think Rutgers is fairly down this year as well. So I don't think these teams are really that far off in how good these teams are. So I think it could be a competitive matchup in that one. Let's see. What else do we have here on tap? And then I was going to talk about Monmouth just because they almost pulled off the upset against Princeton. And you remember what happened the last time they played one of their bigger in-state brothers beating Seton Hall. What happened after that? Well, I faded them after that, and they got annihilated by Lehigh in the game after that. That was a New Jersey sandwich because they had Princeton up next. It was a nice Italian sandwich there in that one. But this looks like a sandwich too because they got number 2 Auburn up next, which they don't expect to beat Auburn on the road. I mean, how could they? They're going to be like a 40-point underdog in that game probably, or 30-something. But still, I mean, it is Auburn. I mean, it's going to be the biggest opponent they face all year. So they have this game sandwiched in here against Fairfield after a big effort game against Princeton. So, oh, man, I'm considering adding this one. I do like the Fairfield side in this one. Fairfield's coming off a loss to Central Connecticut. I mean, Central Connecticut's been a decently competitive team, but I mean, Fairfield, they're probably going to be focused here, like just because they're coming off a couple losses. They're looking for a win at the very least. And I think that they're maybe not the worst team here. I don't know if I quite want to play this one, but the spot looks bad to me for Monmouth. Monmouth is down from 4.5 to 3.5, but I do see 62% of tickets, 55% of the cash on Fairfield. So the one issue that I do have with this is the market read. It looks like Fairfield is a public underdog here, and that's because Fairfield has the better looking record. I mean, they're 5-6, and I think Monmouth is like 1-10. So the odds makers are telling you something here. They're telling you Monmouth is actually the better team despite having a horrific record. So do I want to try to come in and fade that market read where it actually looks too easy to come in and take the points with Fairfield? I don't think I really want to, but I do still side with the Fairfield side here. I do still agree with the Fairfield side. I think it is a pretty big sandwich spot for Monmouth in that one. Charles, what's up? Thanks for hanging out, man. Will, thank you for the kind words, man. What kind of hot sauce would I pair with an Italian sandwich? I don't know, man. I don't put hot sauce on Italian sandwiches because I'm so classic. I just go with the hots. You know, a proper Italian sandwich has the like those red hots on it. You know what I mean? Not red hots because those are candy, but you know what I mean. They have the hot peppers on them, the hots. So that's what I go with. I got the hots for that sandwich, man. And you got to have oil and vinegar on that thing. But I don't know. I'd have to think about that if I was actually going to put a hot sauce on that. You'd want to put like a pretty versatile hot sauce on it, probably like one that like is going to go on a lot of different things. I might say Secret Aardvark might work pretty well. Secret Aardvark might work pretty well on an Italian sandwich, to be honest, because it's not like a massively spicy sauce. Their standard sauce there is like a habanero sauce, but it's tomato based, so it kind of makes sense in that scenario. There, you can put that Secret Aardvark. You can put it on anything, man. It's got really good flavor. So I vouch for Secret Aardvark a lot. It's one of the better sauces out there. Yes, thank you, sir. My hot sauce. I'm the hot sauce aficionado here, but it is still true that I mostly know like kind of the more mainstream hot sauces. But I'll promote Secret Aardvark all the time, man. Why not? What else we got on tap here for? I don't want to talk about every single one of these games, but I'm just going to hit some of the biggest games and hit my plays before I move over here. East Tennessee State -2.5 is my first play, which I see right here. This is coming up at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. Everything starts at noon today, man. So in a little bit over an hour, we get college basketball starting. We get the Penn State college football game. And then an hour after the stupid NFL is starting. So, man, this is a fate of Kansas City, dude. The Kansas City Roos, the Kangaroos, not Hector Roos, a Florida Libertarian. Kansas City, I mean, they're on a roll right now, but look at what they're coming off of, man. They went into Wichita State, which is basically an in-state big brother, essentially, of theirs, and they went in and beat Wichita's 13.5-point underdogs. Wichita only had one home loss, and Kansas City went in there, and I think they caught Wichita, man. I think Wichita was napping and thought they were going to win this game easy. Kansas City beat them, and look at what an outlier this game was, man. I mean, Kansas City, yeah, they did actually out-rebound Wichita, but Kansas City lost the turnover battle horribly. But it's just that Wichita had a horrific shooting performance, 38.7 from the field, 15.8 from three. I mean, that's unsustainable. That is unsustainably low. Kansas City shot 52.8. So it looks like they were having a lot of it looks like they had the edge in the paint in this game. They're having a lot of success in the paint, but still 52.8 from the field. I mean, this was just like, you're going to have to see some regression to the mean here. Even the 3-point percentages, 36.4. I mean, that's about normal, but Wichita just had a horrific shooting game all around, man. So that's what happened in that game. And now that's a huge win for Kansas City, man. That's almost like win of the year type of stuff, man. Because you catch like one of your in-state bigger brothers on their own floor and you actually pull off the upset. Huge win there. Now they get East Tennessee State. Are they really going to be excited about that coming up that Wichita game? They're back home on campus and they're going to have holiday break after this. So I think they might be just basking in this win and looking ahead to this break, man. I don't think they want to play East Tennessee State right now. Meanwhile, East Tennessee State, yeah, I know they're not good on the road so far, but these road games, man, I mean, they lost to JMU, Jacksonville, which Jacksonville's not that horrible, and Wichita. JMU and Wichita aren't that bad. They did lose to Davidson on the road as well. So East Tennessee has faced a pretty difficult schedule, man. I mean, for a team that's in a low conference like this in the Southern Conference, their schedule has not been that easy. But I think the odds makers are going to come in and look at this and think, wait a minute. East Tennessee went and lost at Wichita, Kansas City just went in and beat Wichita at Wichita. And you're telling me that Kansas City is an underdog at home between these two teams? It just looks so easy to take Kansas City, right? But not so fast, man. It doesn't work that way. And East Tennessee, what I like about this is, yeah, they lost 3 straight games on the road. They haven't been good on the road, but they just put in a nice performance against Elon. Elon is actually not really that bad of a team this year, and East Tennessee absolutely blasted them. East Tennessee was the favorite here, but not by a whole lot. And yes, I know this was kind of an outlier. Elon had a horrible shooting game in that game, but even so, I think what that game is going to do, East Tennessee, I mean, you're not going to be that excited about beating Elon, man. Even if you hate Elon Musk, I don't think you're going to be that excited about that win. I think what that does is it just ends your losing momentum, and it gives you some confidence coming out of that, coming into this game. East Tennessee State is the better of these two teams. As the odds makers are telling you, I believe they've faced the more difficult schedule as well. I don't even see it on here. Where is it, man? There it is. East Tennessee State is actually down from 3.5 to 2.5, but I'm just going to grab the value here. I think it's a letdown spot on the side of UMKC. I think KenPom has this line being at about 4 in this one. I mean, UMKC really is not that good, and there's not really a huge pacing collision in this game either. Both teams kind of play a little bit on the slower side, mid-tempo to a little bit slower, but East Tennessee is the better team, and they're the team that can score better than Kansas City can. So give me East Tennessee with Kansas City in what I think is a pretty major letdown spot there. So that is that first play there in college basketball. Let's see. Let's keep going here with this slate here. I was going to hit a couple of the games. I think the other games I was going to hit are mostly the late games, although actually I will talk about UCLA and North Carolina. I mean, this is an interesting one, man, where UCLA ranked 18th, North Carolina unranked. This game's at Madison Square Garden and whatever tournament this is. We have too many early season tournaments, man. This is the CBS Sports Classic. You look at these teams, man. You got UCLA 10-1, ranked 18 in the country. North Carolina sitting at 6-5. And then you look at the line, and UCLA is only a 1.5-point favorite. The public is going to come in all over UCLA here with a line like this. So this is crazy. So even though you see there's a huge record disparity and ranking disparity, but the odds makers are telling you not so fast, man. The odds makers are telling you these teams are almost evenly matched. UCLA down from 2 to 1.5, 55% of the tickets, 79% of the cash on North Carolina. I would agree with the North Carolina side just because this looks like one of those trap lines, man, where it's like the odds makers, they know if they set a line like this, the public is going to come pouring in on UCLA. So why would they set a line like this unless they're fairly confident that they have a decent chance that North Carolina is going to pull off the win in this game? I mean, the odds makers don't just throw money away. So I do think that they sometimes will throw a line up there where their objective is actually not to split the action, even though that usually is their objective because they collect on the VIG. So if they split the action, they win no matter what. But in a game like this, you know you're going to have lopsided action on UCLA. So why do the odds makers do this? I think it's because the odds makers are willing to take that risk and think that there's a decent shot that they'll get a big win. So it's a little bit of risk reward there where they decide to take a little bit of a bigger risk for that chance of that reward, where they think there's a decent chance that reward will happen, which is the North Carolina win here. UCLA has faced the less difficult of the two schedules for sure. I mean, UCLA, they really have not stepped up in class a whole lot here. I mean, they lost to New Mexico, and then they did get some big wins against Oregon and Arizona. So those are pretty good wins. They do have Gonzaga up next, but I mean, you're not going to overlook North Carolina. I mean, it's the Tar Heels. You're playing at Madison Square Garden. Neither team's going to overlook this game, but I do think North Carolina is just being overlooked in general. North Carolina's schedule has been brutal, really. I mean, look at their losses: Kansas, Auburn, Michigan State, Alabama, and Florida. They've lost to all teams that are ranked because Michigan State is ranked now. They've lost to basically like at least almost, I think, 3 basically legitimate top 10 or 15 teams in the country. And they've lost to all of their losses have been to like legitimate top 15 teams in the country. So North Carolina, very battle tested team. The problem I have with this is that they're coming off a big game against Florida, man. So the question is, are they going to be fatigued? Because North Carolina and Florida, they both like to run up and down the court, man. They're both fast-paced teams. So is North Carolina going to have a little bit of fatigue coming into this? That's my only hesitation with North Carolina, because otherwise I like North Carolina. I think they're definitely being undervalued here, and it looks way too easy to play against them here. And then this is going to be an interesting clash of styles here, where UCLA likes to slow the pace way down and North Carolina likes to speed it up. And on a neutral site, it's going to be difficult to determine which one of those teams is going to win out. I mean, UCLA has been able to successfully slow down faster teams like Arizona. So we'll see what happens in that one. So it's not going to quite make the card for me, but that is an interesting one for sure. Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I like the North Carolina side in that one. Next up, I will talk about play number 2 out of my 3 college basketball plays. I'm laying a big amount of points in this one, man, with South Florida in this one. This is at the Yuengling Center, the much coveted Pennsylvania beer, Yuengling. I don't know how widespread they are, and how we can definitely get those things in the Northeast, though. They're like it's almost like if you want to drink PBR, but you want to elevate it a little bit and not drink PBR, not be a total yuppie, like hipster, moron, douchebag, you can get Yuengling. Yuengling's not that bad. So this game, actually, I don't think this game is actually at South Florida's actual home arena, but maybe I'm wrong. Do they play at the Yuengling Center? I don't even know. This is in Tampa. I didn't think South Florida played in Tampa because I don't think that's far south enough to be South Florida. I don't even know, but this game is in Florida nonetheless, and South Florida is obviously the better team. I mean, they're at least a semi-home team here. They've played well when they have played at home, even though this might not be a home game. East Texas A&M has been awful on the road. They're 0-8, even though I actually won on them in one of their road games up here at Stonehill. They covered as an underdog by a half point for me in that game. East Texas A&M, man, I mean, I don't like the spot they're in at all. They just pulled off a big Texas in-state upset over a bigger brother, Abilene Christian. This is a huge win for East Texas A&M, man. They were a 9.5-point underdog in this game, and they pulled off the win, I believe, in front of their home crowd at home in Commerce, Texas. Yeah, because they used to be Texas A&M Commerce, so that is their home arena there. This was a bad shooting game all around, man, for both teams. It was a close game. Any way you look at it, Abilene Christian was winning the game for more than half of it, but it was such a low-scoring game. East Texas A&M hung around in the game, and they pulled off the upset. That's a big upset for them, man. When you beat one of the better teams, well, I mean, it's not a great team, obviously, in Abilene Christian, but when you beat like a team that's considered to be your in-state bigger brother, and they have another one of those up next, although it is after the holiday break against McNeese, but you're coming off that huge win. Are you really going to want to go down to Florida and play South Florida before you have the holiday break? I'm not so sure about that, even though I know that does mean you're playing a better conference team, but it's South Florida, who's sitting at below 500, so how excited do you really get for playing South Florida? I don't know. But South Florida, I think they are going to show up in this game. I think they're going to be pissed. They're coming off a loss to Bethune-Cookman at home. I mean, how do you let that slide without being totally angry and showing up in your next game? This is a horrible loss. They were an 11.5-point favorite in this game. They lost. They didn't even lose. They didn't even just lose. They were losing the whole game. This is a horrific performance with South Florida. They only shot 36.7 from the field, 26.1 from 3. Bethune-Cookman, 43.8 from 3. So you got some big outlier percentages here. South Florida had a particularly bad shooting night, so I expect them to kind of progress back to some sort of mean here. Bethune-Cookman, opponents against South Florida are not going to be able to shoot like that from 3 every single game. So, this is just kind of a ridiculous outlier situation. I don't think this is going to happen again. And because it did happen, South Florida, I expect them to want to show up in this game, man. You're not going to want to let that slide, man. South Florida does actually have a couple of games left here. Well, they do go into Christmas after this, and they have to play right after Christmas again. So they really have no let up here, but I think they're not going to let that loss stand, man. I think they're going to be looking to beat somebody's ass here. When you lose like that, you got pride. You're going to be pissed. You want to get back to 500 as well. And look at the games they were coming off of. Loyola Chicago, that's a pretty good team. Losing to them by 2 on the road and then having to go out to Utah State and losing to them. Utah State's a very good team as well. So they were coming off a couple of really tough games. I think they just kind of ran out of whatever they had left in the tank there. So I think South Florida kind of just got caught in a bad spot there. And now they're going to be in a bounce back spot here where it's East Texas A&M is kind of in the bad spot in this one. So I will lay the points with South Florida. I think they're going to blow them out and blow out the inferior East Texas A&M. I think KenPom has this line at about 14. So give me South Florida, or let me lay the points with South Florida in that one. I know the games I'm actually playing are not that interesting. I will say the line in Furman Harvard is pretty interesting. Harvard kid Furman. I mean, they're down from 4.5 to 2.5 on the road at Harvard. And you look at the records here. It's like, what gives with this line? Furman 11-1 against a 3-7 Harvard team, and Furman is only laying 2.5. That just looks crazy to me. I'm not going to play it, but man, it looks so easy to take Furman in that game. And it is a weird spot for them, having to come up to Harvard, a place they don't usually play. I mean, they're not coming off of any big wins, though, so that's kind of the issue I have. It's not really a spot where it's like a massive fade spot, but it is an interesting one where the odds makers are basically telling you that, well, these teams are actually not, there's not like that significant a difference. Like, it might look like there's a significant difference in the records, but maybe it's not quite that ridiculous. And Harvard at least beat UNH barely. So they at least broke their loss streak that they have, but they do have some losses that are, I mean, they have some bad losses, but they have some losses to some pretty good teams here too, against Colorado. I mean, St. John's. I mean, those losses aren't really that bad. I don't know. Some of these losses are pretty bad though, like Holy Cross. So Harvard, they've been a real like Jekyll and Hyde team this year, man. So I don't know what to expect out of them, but I mean, according to what the odds makers are telling you, it looks like Harvard would be the right side there. If you look at KenPom, though, he does have Furman a little bit better than that and has this line a bit higher than the 2.5. So I'm not going to try when there's no real strong situation there. I'm not going to try to do it, but it's an interesting one nonetheless. Getting through these here, and let me get to my last play here. Pack the Con, Harvard Yard, man. They pack them like sardines there. Creighton -4.5 is my last play in college basketball here. This is going to be a spot where, I mean, I like this one, man. You got Villanova as the team with the better looking record so far against Creighton. Villanova, they're only playing their second true road game of the season, and their only other road game was at St. Joe's. So that was still in their home city in Philadelphia. So Villanova, they've not played a true road game besides that one, if you even want to call it that. They haven't played a true road game outside of their home city of Philadelphia all season. And now they're doing that off of winning their first Big East game against Seton Hall. Even though I know Seton Hall's down this year, Villanova was a big favorite in that one. Seton Hall does suck this year. So it's not really necessarily a letdown spot, but having to go out to Omaha, I mean, this is not an easy spot, man, for Villanova. And Creighton, on the other side of this, I think Creighton is going to show up in this game. I mean, how could you not show up after you lose not only what was your Big East opener, but you lost to one of the lower Big East teams, Georgetown, and you lost to them by 24 points, 81-57. That is an ugly, ugly loss. But look what Creighton was coming off of. They'd beaten Kansas. They didn't have the letdown in the game after that and beat me because I played UNLV in that letdown spot there against Creighton, in Creighton's letdown spot, and Creighton still won and covered. Then they faced Alabama, and they played them tough too to within 8. So, I mean, I think Creighton was in a bad spot in this game against Georgetown, man, coming off a bunch of big games like that. I think they just ran out of steam. Now they're going to have a little bit of time to prepare for this, I think. I don't know how many days off these teams actually have, but to me, it looks like a big-time bounce-back spot for Creighton, man. When you lose like that to a team that's inferior to you as well, even though I know it was on the road, Creighton was a 4.5-point favorite on the road in that one. That should not happen. Not only should that not happen, but you should not lose that badly. That's just a horrendous looking loss. And look at what Georgetown did in this game. 55% from the field and 62.5% from 3. Are you kidding me? I mean, those are such outlier shooting percentages. That's not going to happen again. Creighton, 39.6. I mean, they're a team that can shoot pretty well, so that's pretty low for them. So I like Creighton to bounce back here. And Villanova, they're a team that likes to slow the pace way down and play ugly games. Creighton does not do that. Creighton will speed you up. So this is a pacing collision here. So this looks like it could be a bad spot for Villanova having to go out there. Tough travel spot going out to Omaha, but also Creighton, with the way that they play, they like to play way faster than Villanova does. So that could throw Villanova out of the style of game they want to play. Villanova is still a little bit down this year, man. Give me Creighton in this game. Creighton's up from 3.5 to 4.5 with juice, although it looks like they have 79% of the tickets with 64% of the cash coming in on the other side of Villanova. I don't like that, but my handicapping leads me to this one, tells me that Creighton is in a big-time bounce-back spot there, and it looks like one of those division home games where you want to play the home team. And again, Villanova has the better record too. So to me, I don't see how the public is actually coming in on Creighton here. I don't really buy it, even though I know Villanova does play a very ugly style of basketball. But looking at what the teams have done recently, how is the public going to come in on a Creighton team that just lost by almost 30 to Georgetown? I don't see it. Creighton's sitting at 7-5, Villanova 8-4. So, I mean, the public is very recency biased. So to me, it doesn't seem like that's really actually the case, but we'll see. And then probably the biggest game of the day is Purdue and Auburn. Number 16, Purdue at number 2, Auburn. This game is in Birmingham, Alabama. So this game is, I guess, not at Auburn's home site, but it is in Alabama. It's a neutral site game, I guess, in Birmingham. I have no idea. Whatever that is. Did it say that this is like some tournament or something? I don't know what this is. It is no, it doesn't even say. I don't know, but this game, man, I mean, the public might have a tendency to look at this and say, oh, this is going to be a competitive game between two pretty good ranked teams, but I might disagree with them on this one. Auburn, although I think the line on Auburn has gotten a little bit out of control at this point. It's up from 5.5 to 9 with juice. I think Auburn could potentially be the best team in the country right now. 82% of the tickets, 78% of cash on them. So it looks like maybe there is some buyback coming in finally on the Purdue side, but the initial move, I think it was a legitimate move driving Auburn up. I don't know if there are injuries coming into play here because that's a pretty significant move, but I think that move does mean something at the very least because it's so significant, up from 5.5 to 9 with juice. But at this point, probably there's not a whole lot of value left in trying to lay the points with Auburn there, but Auburn is the better team. They're playing in a semi-home environment at the very least. So that is the way that I would lean in that game. Purdue is coming off a tough game against Texas A&M. So there is that aspect of it as well. Coming off a couple of tough games in a row. I think they played Maryland before that. Auburn's coming off a much easier game against Georgia State. So Auburn, they're probably going to be the less fatigued of these two teams as well. So the lean would be Auburn there. Not going to be a play, obviously. And then we got a couple other games here. Well, I'll just talk about what was the game I just scrolled past? There was one other big game in here. What was it? Oh, Ohio State, Kentucky. Yeah, this game's at Madison Square Garden as well. Kentucky's ranked 4th in the country, but man, I think Ohio State's being undervalued here right now, man. I think Ohio State's probably somewhere around like a top 30 team. I think Kentucky probably is like somewhere around like top 15. I don't think they're the 4th best team in the country. So I think you're probably looking at a situation where you're probably getting some live value on Ohio State here. Kentucky's up from 6.5 to 7.5, 91% of tickets, 89% of the cash. Public is going to come in on Kentucky here, but I think Ohio State might be flying a little bit under the radar in that one. So that's the way I look at that game. I think Ohio State plus the points would be the way to look in that one. If I was going to play that game, that would be my thoughts on that. You do have Drake coming off beating Kansas State. So is Drake going to be in a letdown spot? I'm not really sure. And they're facing a Green Bay team who is definitely inferior to them. Drake, a 24.5 point favorite. So I'm not going to try to get involved in that one either, but just pointing that one out. And then on the other side of that, Kansas State coming off that loss to Drake. Kansas State is definitely down this year. The Wichita coming off that real horrendous loss that I pointed out against Kansas City. So Wichita probably should be in a bounce back mode here. So I would lean to the Wichita side in this one. Kansas State's actually laying 1.5 points on the road there. I don't know which way the public is going to think about this game because Kansas State's certainly the bigger name. It looks like the public is coming in a little bit on them. It's down from 2 to 1.5. 50% of tickets evenly split, 77% of the cash on Wichita. So the market read agrees with me on that one with the Wichita side. So that would be how I would look in that game. And yeah, I mean, all right. Let's move over to what else? Let's move over to the NHL next, I guess, because nobody cares about hockey, right? I have one play in the NHL. The NHL, I mean, Saturday is always a huge slate, but a lot of these games really don't interest me a whole lot at all. You do have Detroit and Montreal. Montreal just beat Detroit in Detroit. So is this going to be a road reversal revenge, a quick revenge spot where now Detroit gets to go on the road and return the favor right back to Montreal? I don't know. Detroit's up from minus 115 to minus 116. 60% of the tickets are on them, though, with 88% of the cash on Montreal. Detroit hasn't been playing that well, really, in general, and Montreal has been playing a little bit better as of late. So I don't know. It's not one I'm going to get involved in at all, though. The Columbus-Philadelphia game, I mean, it's a bad game, but it looks a little bit interesting to me because Columbus just beat New Jersey. So they could be in a little bit of a letdown spot there off a big win over New Jersey, whereas Philadelphia is coming off an ugly loss to the Kings, 7-3. I know the Kings have been playing well, but you lose 7-3 to anybody, you're probably going to want to bounce back from that. So my lean in that one would be to the Philadelphia Flyers, but they are pretty public. They're down from minus 145 to minus 144. 80% of the tickets, 81% of the cash on Philadelphia, but it still looks to me like Philadelphia would be the right side there, with Columbus being what I think is the letdown spot. And then I think probably Toronto also looks like they're not in the greatest spot here. Let me see here quickly. Let me see. Toronto, I think, did they play yesterday? Yeah, Toronto beat Buffalo yesterday. So they're in a back-to-back at the very least. So I don't love the Toronto side here, to be honest. Toronto, let me see. They do have Winnipeg up next, so that is a look-ahead spot as well. They're returning home from a road trip, although it was only a 2-game road trip, so I don't care about that. But they beat Dallas. Then they somehow beat Buffalo, even though they just beaten them. They somehow were still focused on Buffalo. And now they're returning home. They got the Islanders, who just have not been playing well, with Winnipeg up next in 2 days. Looks like Toronto could overlook the Islanders in a spot like this. Islanders coming off playing Carolina, but they got shut out. So they're looking like probably they'd want to be in a bounce back spot here. And they haven't played for a while. So the Islanders have a lot of rest coming into this game. They've had multiple days rest after that. So it looks like a nice bounce back spot for the Islanders. Toronto down from minus 180 to minus 160. 82% of the tickets, 97% of the cash on Toronto. So the cash looks like it's coming in on Toronto according to the percentages, but the line is moving against it. So I don't know. So I like the Islanders. I might consider trying to take a shot with the Islanders, fire on the money line on that one. I don't know, but I mean, that is the way that I would look in that one. Islanders do have a big rest advantage. The Islanders have been letting me down so often that it's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think I quite want to do it. And then we do have Minnesota. Winnipeg is the one huge game today. Winnipeg up from minus 165 to 168. 89% of the tickets, 99% of the cash. So they are public, it looks like. I don't know what to think about this game, to be honest. I mean, both teams are going to show up here. Minnesota, I think, are they in a back-to-back? Let me see. Yes, they are. Minnesota is in a third game in 4 days, and they're in a back-to-back. They just played Utah yesterday, but that was a kind of a sandwich spot between Florida and Winnipeg, so I think they got caught there. Getting to go out on the road, I think this might mitigate the fact that it's a back-to-back a little bit. At the very least, Minnesota might. I mean, they're going to show up focus here. I mean, it's Winnipeg. It's just a matter of how tired are they going to be. But Winnipeg has multiple days off, and they just lost to Anaheim. So they could be in a bounce back spot after an ugly loss there, even though they are returning home. It was not a prolonged road trip there. So both of these teams are going to show up in this game. So it looks like it's a play on spot to some extent for both teams there. So I'm not going to do that. Skip it is right. The one play I will be on in hockey is to fade my Boston Bruins. Buffalo plus 162. Man, I'm going to take this big money line of Buffalo and just take the shot with it and hope it gets there. Boston up from minus 170 to 177. Minus 177. 78% of the tickets, 97% of the cash, though, on Boston. So it does look like the money is actually coming in, driving the line up on Boston. I don't agree with it. I mean, the only thing about Buffalo is they're in a back-to-back, but Boston, I mean, this is a bad spot. They just went out to the Pacific Northwest. They've been on the road since December 10th. Now they have to come home, and you come home, you have to get stuff put away. They're coming off 2 overtime games. They have to get some, family life to deal with. They have to get stuff put away. They have to get ready for the holidays. Coming off an overtime game against Edmonton. I mean, that's a big game. Coming home facing Buffalo. I don't think they're going to totally pay attention to Buffalo here. And they do have Washington up next, which is a much bigger opponent as well. So to me, it looks like this is one of those spots where Boston might get caught for two reasons. I think it's a sandwich spot, and it's a spot where Boston's going to be pretty fatigued here, but it is also that return home distracted spot for them. So I don't like it at all. Buffalo, the only thing I don't like with Buffalo is that it's a back-to-back. So I don't like that, but they did have multiple days off prior to that. The other thing I don't like is that they keep losing, but at some point it's got to end, man. So, I mean, I was able to jump in front of the Winnipeg train and get that one right when Winnipeg lost a long win streak. So why not Buffalo breaking a long loss streak here? Why not? They played horribly yesterday and lost 6-3. They lost 6-1 to Montreal the game before that. So, I mean, it's not like they're not going to show up here. Maybe getting out of town is going to help them. They just get to forget about it. The travel shouldn't be that horrible going from Toronto to Boston. It's starting a road trip for them. So that tends to be a focus spot because you get out of home. So you get to leave all those distractions behind. So I'll take the shot on Buffalo, even though they did play yesterday. We'll probably get their lesser goalie in net today, but at least you'll get a rested goalie if they do that. Both of their goalies suck. So whatever. We'll play on the Buffalo Sabres in that one. NBA. There's a decent NBA slate today, but man, I don't even know. And it's not even switching over to NBA. That's just great. Thank you, pregame. What is going on here, man? Let's see. All right, NBA. I don't even know if I want to talk about too many of these games. We do have a zigzag spot in Lakers Kings because Lakers did just win at Sacramento. So now it could zigzag with Sacramento maybe taking game 2 here. But the problem is the line in the first game was 4.5, and now it's up to 6 in this one. So the odds makers, they know about the zigzag. The cash is coming in on the zigzag. 70% of the tickets there, 62% of the cash coming in and playing the Lakers. Again, like I said, I would lean to the Kings in that one still, but it looks like you're getting a little bit less value on that one. Now, I forgot to talk about Knicks T-Wolves in their previous game because that was the big battle of the trade where you have KAT now on the Knicks and you got Randall on the T-Wolves. And I thought the T-Wolves would probably win that game, but man, that did not happen. The Knicks went in and just blew out the T-Wolves. Huge win for the Knicks. I do think KAT is the better end of that trade than Randall. As I keep saying, I think Randall doesn't play defense. The Knicks, though, man, I mean, they could be in a letdown spot after that huge win at the T-Wolves. They're down from 8.5 to 8 in this one. Very public, 83% of tickets, 66% of the cash. But do I want to come in and try to play on this still horribly injured Pelicans team? No, I really don't. So I'm not going to do it. T-Wolves are playing the Warriors. They're down from 5 to -3. 54% of the cash, though, coming in on the T-Wolves. 59% of the tickets on the Warriors. But I think in this case, both of these teams are actually coming off really ugly losses. So I think they're both in bounce back spots. Golden State, yeah, they just got annihilated by Memphis. Minnesota just got annihilated by the Knicks. So it's kind of like pick your poison in this one. Like, which one of these teams do you think is going to bounce back better, basically? Which team is going to bounce back better instead of build back better? I don't know. That's an interesting game, but man, I don't have much of an opinion on that game very much at all. These other games don't really interest me a whole lot, to be honest. Clippers Mavs, I think, is also a zigzag where the Clippers just destroyed the Mavs. I mentioned it was a terrible spot for the Mavs as they were returning home, but I didn't want to play the Clippers because it was also an injured player theory spot with Luka being out for the first time. So I thought that the Mavs would maybe step up in his absence, and now it's going to be their second game without him. So I still don't like the Mavs there, even though now it could be a bounce back spot for the Mavs because they got murdered in that previous game in that return home spot. So on the one hand, looks like it should be a bounce back for them, but on the other hand, it's the second game without Luka. So it's also kind of a regression spot at the same time. So I don't like it. Mixed signals on that one. Mavs are up from 3 to 3.5, though. 82% of tickets, 99% of the cash on them. So whatever you think about that, I don't know what we think about that. My play, though, just for the sake of time, I'm going to try to do this quick. I'm going to play the Boston Celtics, and I know I'm laying a huge road price on a public team. Sometimes you do want to do this in the NBA, though, man, when it's the better team and it's in a good spot to do it, and it is here. I know my Boston Celtics, and I know what this spot is. We saw this time and time again in the playoffs, man. When the Celtics have a bad game at home and they don't show up and they get caught, and they lose to a far inferior team, and then they have to play that same team again right away on the road. We saw that all throughout the playoffs. The Celtics were excellent in this spot. They've been excellent in this type of spot with this current lineup with Joe Mazzulla there. And I think that's what this spot is. Celtics are public with 70% of tickets, but 78% of the cash. The money is coming in on the Celtics. It's now up from 9.5 to 12.5. I don't think it matters that much between 11.5 and 12.5. We're not talking about key numbers here, really. I think the Celtics are going to come in and win in a blowout. I mean, I was at that last game against the Bulls. The Celtics were obviously the better team, and it was just a weird game, man, where the Celtics were the Celtics, it was a close game most of the way, and it looked like the beast was going to be unleashed at some point, and the Celtics would finally just start pulling away with it, and that didn't happen. Celtics went on a couple of stretches where they didn't score, and then we saw how that game ended with Joe Mazzulla getting teed up and like a few ridiculous technicals where the refs were really making some bad calls at the end of that game. It was a bad situation overall. I think the Celtics are going to be real pissed after that, and they're going to show up. The Celtics shot horribly in that game too, 39.2, and they also died by the three, which sometimes they do, 25% from three. They had a really off shooting night. They dominated the turnover battle at the very least. The Bulls shot 36.5 from three. They hit a ton of threes. They were in like the double digits from 3-point range. This is going to be a big time regression to the mean spot, I think, man, where the Celtics are not only going to show up focused because of what this result was, but I mean, the Celtics, they rarely shoot this poorly from the field and from three. The Bulls may take a little bit of a step back with their 3-point shooting as well. The Bulls really still don't play very good defense. So this could be one of those games where it winds up also being pretty high scoring. I mean, the total is sky high at 242.5. So that also is good for laying points like this. If the total's way high, it makes it way easier to cover a big number as a favorite like this. Celtics, I mean, they jack up tons of threes. So if those threes are going down, it'll help them out as well. And Chicago, like I said, they don't play defense. Chicago could definitely take a step back here. And it is also a letdown spot now for Chicago because they put in that huge effort in that game the other night. So are they really going to be able to sustain that effort again? I know they're still going to be focused on Boston, but man, Boston, I mean, they do well when they lose at home in an embarrassing fashion. They lose at home as a big favorite, and they go out on the road and play that same team again. Celtics are very good in this spot, very good at making the adjustments. They're the team that's going to have all the adjustments to make. I think they're going to go in and just wreck Chicago in this game. I think they're going to blow the doors off of them. So give me my Boston Celtics. I'm fading one Boston team, and I'm playing the other Boston team. That is correct, yes. Unburdened by what has been. Yeah, the Boston Bruins have not been good either. They've been a bit better since they fired the coach, but I mean, nothing to really write home about. College football playoffs. Here we go. Today is entirely dedicated to the playoffs. First game up. I already talked about this in my playoff special, so you can go look at that too. I like all the favorites. Let's just put it that way. SMU at Penn State. Penn State sitting at 8.5, a little bit up on the 8.5, 67% of tickets, 73% of the cash on Penn State. I like Penn State in this one, man. What can you say? I think they're the better team. I mean, yes, they are coming off a tough loss in the Big Ten championship to Oregon, so they did have to play a big step-up game there. But I mean, SMU had to play a big step-up game too against Clemson. And not only did they do that, but Clemson was running away with that game, and SMU put in a huge effort late in the game to come all the way back, and then they only lost on a late field goal. So SMU put in a huge effort too, and now SMU's got to go up to Penn State in the cold. I don't like it at all, man. I mean, SMU, they're not a cold weather team. They're not as good a team as Penn State. Penn State has faced the significantly more difficult schedule. We're looking at a game that's going to be 27, even though it's going to be during the day. I think this does not bode well for SMU. Penn State is the better team. When you get, playoff games like this, just like we saw last night with Notre Dame, the better team, I think, is more often than not going to win out in games like this where you get both teams showing up. You want to tend to look towards the better team in situations like this. So lean to Penn State in that one. Clemson, Texas, I do lean to Texas as well. They're up from 10.5 to 13.5. Basically, it seems like nobody really thinks that Texas can win by margin because they've been so ugly offensively. Everybody's making fun of Quinn Ewers, saying, are they going to switch to Arch Manning? Nobody knows. Texas is just really being shit on, as I also mentioned in my college football show. But yeah, their offense has definitely struggled, but you're still looking at a Texas team that is way better than Clemson. I mean, has Clemson's offense been very good? No, it really has not. And Clemson has not faced a slate of SEC defenses like Texas has. I mean, Texas has had to face Georgia twice, even though I know they didn't step up well in those games, and they lost to Georgia twice. But I mean, those games, Texas played close in the second game. They probably should have won that second game. So it's not like Texas is going out there and just getting the doors blown off them. Texas, they have the way better defense here. They probably have the best defense in the country. They're playing at home here. They've faced the more difficult schedule. They're from the more difficult conference. This game is double digits for a reason, man, although it is up from 10.5 to 13.5. But I think as long as it doesn't hit that 14, if you really wanted to play the side here, that's the way I would look, even though it looks like 55% of tickets, 53% of the cash on Texas. But my preference in this game is actually to play the under because I think both offenses are not that prolific, and Texas plays very good defense. Both of these teams are actually more defense-oriented, and we also saw Clemson coming off a really high-scoring game against SMU, man. So there is that aspect of it. On the one hand, you could argue that Clemson is kind of free-rolling here because it looked like they had no shot at all to even be here to make the playoffs. So maybe they're basically playing with no pressure on them, whereas Texas does have pressure on them because they did expect to be here. So that's kind of why I don't want to come in and actually try to play the side in this one, but the under does make sense, but it is down from 52 to 49.5, 53% of tickets on the over, 73% of the cash on the under though. But yes, I do agree with the under in this one, more so than the side, but I lean to Texas and I like the under in that one. I think the better team will at the very least win out. I think Texas will at the very least get out of this game with a win, if not a win by margin. But I do expect it to be low scoring just because of Texas's offensive struggles and how good their defense is. I think Clemson is really going to struggle, man. I mean, when Clemson stepped up and they played a defense that's as elite as Texas's defense is, which was when Clemson played Georgia, even though I know it was to open the season. So Clemson really hadn't gotten into the rhythm yet, but Clemson only scored 3 points in that game. So Clemson, I mean, it doesn't look like they really have the ability to put up a lot of offense against very good defenses like this. You could see Clemson maybe putting up very few points in this game. It may make sense to also look to play Clemson's team total under the total in this one. I don't know what it is, but I could see them really struggling against Texas's defense in this game. And then the game I'm actually going to play is the last one of these, laying the points with Ohio State -7. It is up to 7 with juice. It looks like there are 7, 7.5s, and 7 with juice out there. I mean, if you want to lay -7, -115, I think that's fine as well. It looks like it went up to -117 consensus, but I think if you're laying upwards of even -7, -120, just to avoid paying the little bit extra, just to avoid the hook, basically, it makes sense to probably pay up to like -120 maybe, because there's probably a decent chance this game does land on 7. I know it is a very low total. It's the lowest total out of any of these games, but I think Ohio State is going to win this game, man. Ohio State's got 60% of the cash on them, but the tickets look like they're evenly split 50-50. To me, it looks like Tennessee is probably the most public of all of these college football underdogs here, man. I mean, this is the 8-9 matchup. So and Tennessee's from the SEC. Everybody's thinking this is going to be a competitive matchup, thinking that Ohio State is not that good. And that's just, you want to fade recency bias, man. And that's just the type of spot where you want to come in on Ohio State, man. Ohio State didn't have to play in the Big Ten championship, so they didn't have to play, although Tennessee hasn't had to play in a conference championship either. But I think that helps Ohio State a little bit more, because what did Ohio State do to end the season? They lost as a 19 or 20-point favorite at home to Michigan, and that's what everybody's harping on. Oh, Ohio State lost to Michigan. Ohio State sucks. That's what everybody is saying, because that's the last thing I saw out of Ohio State. Do you really not think that Ohio State's going to come into this in a pissed-off mood, with that being the narrative right now, that Ohio State is terrible? They can't even beat Michigan. Like, what are we talking about here? It seems like the public wants to come in and take Tennessee here. Yeah, no. I think Ohio State is going to show up in this game. They're going to be pissed. They're in a bounce back spot because that game was ugly. I don't think they really fully focused on Michigan, to be honest. Even though I know it's a big rivalry game, Ohio State knew they were already going to be in the playoffs here. So I really think Ohio State just didn't really put in a full effort in that game, man. And you could kind of tell they didn't. So, I mean, I think that's the situation there. Tennessee, they have not done well when they've stepped up in class, man, and faced better defenses. They have really struggled offensively. I mean, they beat some cupcakes early in the season, but look at what they did once they started playing good defenses. Like in the SEC, they really didn't do much at all offensively. They only topped 30 points twice more, and it was against Vandy and Mississippi State. Those were the only two SEC teams that Tennessee was able to score 30 or more against. All the rest of these defenses, and yeah, Ohio State is definitely a good defense. All the rest of these defenses they faced were able to hold Tennessee's offense in check to a pretty decent extent. This Tennessee offense, man, not really as vaunted as it was supposed to be to start the season. Tennessee, they do struggle when they have to step up in class and face better defenses. And yeah, Ohio State is not only a better defense, but they're also a pretty good offense. They got an experienced quarterback there with Will Howard as well. So this Ohio State team, I mean, they're thought of as a defensive team, but they can also score. They're a balanced team, man. I think they have more balance. I think they have more talent than Tennessee. I think they're the better team than Tennessee. And this is going to be a cold weather game, man. Tennessee has to go out to a cold weather night game at the Shoe where the crowd is going to be fucking insane. It's going to be in the 20s during this game. It doesn't look that great to me for Tennessee, man. So for all those reasons, I like Ohio State here, man. I mean, I think Ohio State is in the much better position to bounce back. You want to take good teams when they're in an embarrassed spot like this, and Ohio State coming off that game against Michigan. Yeah, I think they're in a very embarrassed mood here. They're in a major bounce back spot here. Give me Ohio State in that one. And that's going to do it for all my plays today. Thank you, sir. And yes, let's go Celtics. Let's go C's. I don't have any NFL plays, but I'll hit these NFL games, then I'll get out of here and make sure that my bowl picks are set for the day. Texans and Chiefs is the first game up. I don't even know what. I think this one's on NBC, and I think the other game is on, I don't even know what the other game is on, CBS maybe, because it's an AFC game. No idea, but you can find where these games are. Texans Chiefs is the first game up. I talked about both of these games last night. Chiefs are down from 4 to 3.5. We got now 58% of tickets and 67% of the cash coming in on the Texans. So initially, I was thinking, well, what's going on with this line has been weird in general. I mean, the Chiefs opened a 4-point favorite. Then it looked like Mahomes wasn't going to play. So then the Texans flipped to a 2-point favorite because Mahomes wasn't going to play. Now he is going to play, and the line's all the way back to almost where it started at 3.5, maybe a little bit less than the 4, just because Mahomes may be a little bit of a question mark because he may not be at totally 100% here. So I'm trying to figure out, like, is the public actually coming in on Houston here because of the Mahomes injury, kind of like 2 years ago where I rode Kansas City throughout the playoffs that year because everybody was downgrading Kansas City in their mind. It's too much because of the Mahomes injury that year. Are they doing that this year too, though? I don't know. Because Kansas City rolled. It didn't even matter that he was injured. They just inject his ankle, basically, and he continues to roll. But in this game, man, I mean, I talked about this yesterday. Kansas City, out of all 4 teams playing today, might be the team that has the least reason to show up in this game, even though they still have a reason to show up because it is an isolated game that's, you know, a nationally televised game. But they do have Pittsburgh up next, which is a big game. Kansas City's sitting as a 1-loss team right now, so they're sitting very pretty right now. They've already clinched the division. They're very close to having clinched the 1 seed, which I think they can afford to maybe lose one game and still like have that 1 seed pretty much wrapped up. So it is possible that Kansas City doesn't actually show up fully focused in this game. Houston, though, I mean, they've already wrapped up their division pretty much. So they're almost definitively in the play. I think they already are, actually, because they have the tiebreaker against Indy. I talked about this last night as well. I think even if Indy winds up in a tie with them, Indy already has lost the tiebreaker with Houston because Houston already beat them twice. So Houston, the reason they have to show up, though, is because they're going to Arrowhead, man. So I think Houston probably is going to show up for this game, getting to play the national champs on national TV on the road at Arrowhead. And Kansas City, as we know, they've really struggled to cover like any sort of number at all as a favorite. And at home recently, it's been even worse. Kansas City has really been winning by very small margins at home. A lot of 1, 2, and 3-point wins at home this year. So maybe it does make sense to lean to the Texans side in this one slightly, but I don't know, man. I think it makes more sense to play the under in this game than the side. It's down from 44.5 to 42.5, 56% of tickets, 55% of the cash on the over. Because I don't know if the sentiment is still, oh, it's Stroud and Mahomes. But I think after an entire season, basically, of seeing these offenses are not actually that impressive this year, I don't know if the public is really going to be coming in and playing the over here at that point because of what they've seen there. So I don't think that that's the case. I think both of these teams play more defense than offense here, man. You could see kind of a slower, more defensive game in this one. So I think the under does make sense because even though you have two hyped quarterbacks here in Stroud and Mahomes, we know both of these offenses really have struggled pretty badly this year. So the under may make sense in that one. And then Steelers, Ravens, the huge game, man, because this is going to have big implications as far as the AFC North is concerned. Ravens up from 5 to 7, 59% of tickets, 65% of the cash coming in on the Ravens. I agree with the Ravens side in this one, man. The Ravens have a little bit more to play for in this game, man, because they are sitting behind Pittsburgh. They already lost to Pittsburgh once on the road. They're sitting behind them right now. And if they lose this game, they're going to effectively be 3 games behind Pittsburgh, and they're going to have to be fighting for a wild card spot. But if they win this game, they'll be tied with them. And I don't even know which way the tiebreaker will fall if that's the case. So huge implications for Baltimore, maybe a little bit less so for Pittsburgh. Although if Pittsburgh wins this game, they'll basically clinch the division. So there are big implications on both sides, but I do still like the Baltimore side. I think people might see this and think, oh man, Pittsburgh beat the Ravens again here. But if you look at this game, Baltimore just was bad in the turnover department, -2 in turnovers. They did outgain Pittsburgh a little bit. Baltimore was a 2-point conversion away from sending that game into overtime. Baltimore was a 3-point road favorite in that game. So the odds makers are telling you Baltimore is actually the better team, and that's why their line is like a touchdown favorite at home here. I think if you wanted to lay anything up to 6.5 on Baltimore, I think does make sense to do it here. It is a little bit of the in-season revenge motive as well. Baltimore is going to be the more rested team coming into this game because last week they easily beat the Giants and they had a bye before that. So last 2 weeks they had a bye and then basically another bye beating the Giants. But at least because they played, that means they get their rhythm back a little bit too. So I think the situation sets up a lot better for Baltimore as well, whereas Pittsburgh is coming off a much more physical battle in the battle for Pennsylvania against the Philadelphia Eagles. So I don't like it as much for Pittsburgh for that reason either. Pittsburgh is also playing on Christmas against Kansas City, but it's not like they're going to overlook the Ravens. And I guess the one other thing Pittsburgh does have going for them is that Mike Tomlin and Pittsburgh, they have figured out how to shut down Lamar Jackson. So they do have the ability to do that. But Baltimore does have a lot of ways to hurt you on offense, man. So I still like the Baltimore side in this one. And I also like the over in this game. I like the side better, but I like the over as well. And the over seems like it is correlated with the Ravens side because the Ravens are actually the offensive team here out of these two, or the Steelers are the defensive team. And I know usually I say I like the better defense getting points, which is the Steelers here. But in this game, I don't actually like that. I think we may see a higher scoring game here, and that's going to help the Ravens maybe actually get this win by margin here. The Steelers really, they have not been that impressive as far as their schedule here. And Steelers have not had too many games where they've stepped up in class. I know they beat this Ravens team already, like I said, but the other games they've stepped up. They lost to Philadelphia. What other big opponents have they really faced this year? They faced a pretty weak schedule, to be honest. Baltimore's faced a bit of a more difficult schedule. So there is that going for Baltimore as well. Odds makers, again, are factoring that in and telling you that's part of the reason why Baltimore's the better team. The total's down from 46.5 to 44. 57% of the tickets and 61% of the cash on the over. So even though the line has moved down, I think you're getting some value on the over, man, because that first game was low scoring. Pittsburgh had no touchdowns in the game, which is crazy. They won with no touchdowns, which I think I mentioned it last night was the second game this year they did that. They did it in their opener against Atlanta, too, I'm pretty sure. They had 3 50-plus yard field goals from Boswell, the best fantasy kicker in professional sports, man, in the NFL, and he's on my fantasy team, which is going to lose anyway because I have way too many injuries. But the Steelers, they did. That does mean they got into scoring range a bunch of times. So at the very least, there is that. So it means maybe that game should have been a little bit higher scoring than it was on the scoreboard. Both teams put up over 300 yards of offense, which isn't that bad. So that game wasn't really quite as low scoring as it looked, I would say, in my opinion. The Steelers had to settle for field goals multiple times where maybe they could have gotten into the end zone. So there was that. And Baltimore, you think of them as a defensive team, but they're not really at this point. Mike McDonald is gone. Their defense is taking a step back, losing some of his personnel as well. Baltimore is a much more offensive team. They have one of the top offenses in the NFL. and their defense is a little bit vulnerable. So the Steelers could score against this Ravens defense, and the Ravens may be prolific enough on offense that they'll be able to score against the Steelers defense too. So that's how I look at this game. Ravens and over would be the leans in that one. And that's going to do it, man. We got it. We got through the whole card. Andrew, thanks for showing up, man. Yes, divert your money to our smaller podcast. Yeah, the Chiefs still have the Swifties following them. Yeah, I don't know. Baltimore is definitely an offensive city, man. I mean, they are, yeah, a lot of what goes on in Baltimore is offensive. That's going to do it for me, man. I'm Tower Gang Toad. Thanks for hanging out again, guys. My plays one more time today. College basketball, East Tennessee State -2.5, South Florida -12.5, Creighton -4.5, hockey, Buffalo Sabres +162, NBA, Boston Celtics -11.5, college football, Ohio State -7. That's going to do it. Tower Gang Toad on Twitter, patreon.com/Tower Gang. You get to throw us some support. Get live pre-show, post-show, get to hang out with us in a Telegram, and that is it. That's going to do it for me. Have a good one, man. Let's have a winning fucking Saturday. Let's try to at least be less in the red at the end of the year, man. I don't know why you guys continue to listen to me with as bad of a year I've had, but the last 2 years were great. So, and if you guys are following me towards the end of last year, my November and December were fucking insane last year. They were so good. Thank you, Charles. Thanks to all you guys for hanging out, man. Charles, Andrew, all you guys. Who else was in here? Nate. Nate wasn't in here this morning. He was in there last night. And Will. Thanks, guys, for hanging out. That's going to do it for me. Let's get these bowl picks in as well. Peace out, guys.